with the Planning, Design, and Development Department. I think on the call we have other folks from staff. If you want to wave, we have Molly and Ren, and I believe Julian from CDOT. Yeah, so, and I'm sure by now a lot of you have been on virtual meetings. Just please be aware of, keep only one audio sound. This meeting is better to view it on a desktop. There will be an exercise towards the end that if you're on your phone, it will be a little difficult to navigate. So today's objective is to have a community conversation about the draft 2040 policy map recommendations within the Southwest Middle area. Before we dive into today's conversation, we will provide some high-level information about the Charlotte Streets Map and Charlotte Future 2040 policy map. However, a more in-depth overview of the two projects is recorded and available online, and someone will be dropping the link in the chat. So with that, let's briefly review some basic information. So what is the purpose of the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map and the Charlotte Streets Map? The purpose of these two maps is to help implement the vision of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which is the guiding document for our city's growth and development over the next 20 years. The Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan was adopted in June 2021, and there are now several major initiatives underway to help put the plan into action that you might have heard of. The Charlotte Future 2040 policy map will identify appropriate locations for future development in our neighborhoods. The Charlotte Streets Map will define the multimodal vision for Charlotte streets to support mobility between the places we live, work, and play. And the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO, will consolidate and update the city's land development regulations so future development is aligned with the vision of the comprehensive plan. The Charlotte Future 2040 policy map and the Charlotte Streets Map will both help implement the vision of the Charlotte Future 2040 comprehensive plan by informing how our built environment evolves and changes over time. The built environment includes both land use and transportation related characteristics. So each map provides supporting information about the places we want to create. Again, the 2040 policy map will inform the type of development that's appropriate to occur in specific geographies throughout the community, and the Charlotte Streets Map will define the future cross-section for arterials, including the future curb line location and streetscape requirements. With an understanding that both maps are intended to help implement the vision of the comprehensive plan and that they will both help inform the city's built environment over time, let's take a closer look at the Charlotte Streets Map, and then we'll get into the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map. So before going into details on the map itself, it's helpful to consider what a street actually is. A street looks, feels, and functions the way it does based on all the components extending from building front to building front, listed here on the screen. And these various components of the street, from bike and pet amenities to travel lanes, work in concert together to serve all users. Not all streets will look like this. This is a graphic illustration of this specific street. So before going into details of the map itself, it's helpful. So the streets map is the mapped vision of our multimodal street network. It's based on council adopted policies that have been developed and refined over the last several years. It shows a recommended cross-section for all of Charlotte's arterial streets and will support the UDO to ensure that we're building multimodal streets as we grow and develop. Note that this draft is a citywide streets map. The streets around the blue line were mapped and adopted in 2019. The map remains in place, but will ultimately be folded into the citywide map as shown here. We want to remind you that you can go online to review and provide comments on the streets map through November 14th. When you click on an arterial street, there will be a pop-up box that includes information about the street cross-section that you can review. And there's a video available at the address shown on the screen that provides instructions for how to leave a comment on the draft recommendations. Moving on to the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map. The map is a companion to the Charlotte Future 2040 comprehensive plan and provides guidance for where and how development should occur in the future. What's important about this map is it provides a comprehensive and citywide direction for how Charlotte will balance both the needs and opportunities that come with future growth. For example, the map will ensure our city can accommodate its projected growth while also protecting features that are important to residents, such as the natural environment and established neighborhoods. The mapping effort will ensure we align future growth with infrastructure capacity so that we grow smartly and maximize our resources. And finally, the 2040 policy map citywide direction means we can ensure historically underserved areas are guaranteed better access in the future and Charlotte becomes a more equitable city. The Charlotte Future 2040 policy map was developed using a new tool called place types and followed a three-step process. Place types are a new classification system to organize patterns of development. They are more complete and holistic than the city's old classification system called future land use or adopted future land use. You might have heard that term, which only provides guidance for the type of development, residential, commercial, or institutional, for example, permitted on a property. In comparison, place types provides guidance for the mix and proportions of land use, building form and design, mobility, and open space. The place types tool was vetted by the community during the development of the comprehensive plan. This mapping process will focus on where to assign those place types throughout the community. Using the new place types tool, the draft Charlotte Future 2040 policy map was developed following 3 steps. So due to time, I'll talk about these 3 steps as we review the draft 2040 policy map recommendation in this geography. So these are the 10 place types that were adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. It ranges from neighborhood 1, which is primarily low density housing and comprises some small multifamily units and ADUs, but it's mainly single family and low density, all the way to a regional activity center, which is, Uptown Center, which is your highest, most intense, high density mixed use area, typically around transit corridors and major roadways. And all these place types were adopted as part of the comprehensive plan and is what the 2040 policy map is now mapping. So there were several data inputs used in each of the 3 mapping steps. Again, for the sake of time, I'll touch upon these data inputs as we review the policy map recommendations in this area. Tonight, we're focused on, this is the phase 2 community conversations, and they're organized around 15 community planning areas throughout the city. Today's meeting is about the Southwest Middle Community Planning Area, which is generally the area south of the airport, between I-45 and I-77. It includes the area around Billy Graham, West Tyvola, City Park, Old Coliseum area, and the area around Whitehall, Arrowwood, and South Tryon Street. That's the area we'll be focusing on for this meeting. So as mentioned, the mapping approach began by translating what's on the ground today and what future place types would look like without the comprehensive plan. So the first step in developing the draft 2040 policy map was to translate what's on the ground today into the place types tool. This translation was based on existing land use data, and development patterns. In this area, we see it basically includes a lot of the place types, and the dark gray areas are vacant land. And I know some of that land is actually now under construction with development, but at the time the data was inputted, it was considered vacant land. So the second step in the mapping approach was to translate the city's adopted policies and existing entitlements into place types. This translation was based on several inputs: future land use recommendations for areas that have area plans adopted since 2010, and zoning in the remaining areas. You can see how the place type assignments change between the existing development and adopted policy map on the right side of the slide. So these are the percentages that you see either increasing or decreasing. So this map reflects how Charlotte would grow and change if we didn't implement recommendations from the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. So the third step in the mapping process was to build upon the adopted policies map. You might have also heard it referred to as a status quo map. So it reflects the priorities of the comprehensive plan. And the first priority applied to this step of the process was to preserve or protect what was identified in the plan as community assets. The comprehensive plan includes policies to preserve existing neighborhood 1, parks and preserves, and manufacturing and logistics, because these were identified as community assets in the plan development process. You can see those 3 place types shown on this map. In some areas, these place types were already preserved based on adopted policies. The areas highlighted in blue show additional areas where these place types were preserved as part of this step. You can see the percentage change in these place type assignments on the right of the slide. So after we walk through the existing steps in the mapping approach, we're going to ask for your opinion on whether or not you think they align with the values and priorities of the comprehensive plan. So we'll revisit this step a little later in the presentation. The next priority from the comprehensive plan was incorporated into the mapping process was to improve access to jobs, housing, and goods and services in underserved areas. Improving access to these 3 necessities is a hallmark of the 2040 comprehensive plan and outlined within the equitable growth framework, which was part of the plan. We'll first take a look at how this effort attempted to improve access to housing opportunity in this area. On this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are lacking access to housing diversity, meaning you can't easily find a variety of housing types in these areas. Diverse housing types are important for providing a range of housing prices and lifestyle choices for community members. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access to housing is currently lacking. However, from a mapping approach, the place type tool can really only address housing unit diversity. So that was the focus of this step. And that's the bullet point that's underlined. The other metrics would be addressed through other programs and projects in the city, not through the mapping process. So neighborhood 2 is a place type that helps provide more housing opportunities because it allows a wider range of building types, from quadruplexes and townhomes to apartments. So by finding opportunities to allow neighborhood 2 in this area, we think more housing choices will be constructed in this area in the future. In some areas, neighborhood 2 was already mapped based on adopted policies. The areas highlighted in blue show additional areas where neighborhood 2 was recommended as part of this step. And I know in this map, and it was mentioned earlier in the meeting earlier today, some of these areas highlighted are actually under construction now for a different type of place type. And those are things that we would need to correct as part of this engagement effort. So here you can see these first 4 place types on the 2040 policy map. The next component of the equitable growth framework is improving access to employment opportunity. On this map, areas outside the black, again, the black diagonal hatches, are lacking existing access to employment opportunity, meaning there aren't a lot of jobs in this area. Again, the bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access currently is lacking. The place type mapping focused on providing the opportunity for employment within a commute shed, which is 1.5 miles of every neighborhood, not within every neighborhood per se. The items that aren't underlined can happen within any employment area, and therefore other tools outside of place types will be explored to help address these gaps. So campus and innovation mixed use are two of the work category place types and can help provide more employment opportunities within close proximity to neighborhood. So by finding opportunities to allow more campus and IMU, the innovative mixed use, in this area, it will create more employment opportunities in the future. And normally we would see where they highlighted addition of these place types, but I don't see that they were highlighted in this specific area. I know this area is a little constrained on some of the environmental features and also the airport just north of this area. So here you can see these first 6 place types on the 2040 policy map. Next, we'll look at mapping of the access to essential amenities, goods, and services policies, the third component of the equitable growth framework. On this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are lacking existing access to essential amenities, goods, and services. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access currently is lacking. The underlying metrics were specifically identified as items place type mapping could help address. Again, the items not underlined within the employment area, and therefore other tools outside of place types will be explored to help address these gaps. Commercial and activity centers are place types that can help provide more access to amenities. Here you can see in red, pink, blue, and navy where these 4 place types are mapped. And normally would be areas highlighted in blue would be additions, but I don't see any additions in this specific geography. So now this is the complete 2040 policy map for this specific geography. The last component of the equitable growth framework is environmental justice. On this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are impacted by environmental justice issues. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where environmental justice is currently lacking. New, more intense place types were not mapped in the floodplain. So place type mapping effort also used buffering and transitions to reduce the proximity between neighborhoods and heavy industrial uses or major transportation infrastructure, which you do find in this area. Opportunities to provide buffering or transitions are limited based on existing development, so other tools outside of place types will be explored to help address these inequities. Some of these tools could be things like programming, design solutions, infrastructure projects. So that concludes the last step in the current mapping approach. I mentioned earlier that we'd like to get your opinion on whether or not you think these steps align with the values and priorities of the comprehensive plan. So we have a few polling questions for you now. And I think we were going to have a poll, but it's not working. We're going to be pasting it in the chat.
And since there's not very many people here tonight, you can just go ahead and give us your opinion in the chat, or you can come on
or you
off
could
mute and speak up.
Yeah, we can have a conversation, yes. So I see the question was placed in the chat. And the question is, in the mapping step to preserve neighborhood 1 and parks and preserves, does it align with the Charlotte Future 2040 comprehensive plan's direction to protect community assets? Do you agree? You strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree? And we can go to the next question.
Jimmy, I think you're the one in the like the only one in the meeting, so I don't know if you wanted to speak up and just tell us what you thought, or if you had a comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's a little, I mean, this area, I don't live over in this area. I just wanted to kind of get like a more, I guess, just get an understanding of like what these maps are with everything. And sort of like, because it looks like, as far as like, uh, it looks like the vacant land use is all being geared towards like manufacturing and logistics and that sort of thing, or was that there previously in that area, or is
Some
that
of that,
projecting vacant land use?
some of the vacant land has actually been entitled for, meaning has a zoning for manufacturing and logistics through industrial uses, industrial zoning. So it's trying to protect some of the existing entitlements. Again, that's a zoning regulation, it's a legal entitlements that go with the land. So trying to protect that as well, but trying to accommodate also future growth and development, which includes a variety of aspects, from neighborhood 1, again, the low density, neighborhood 2, to some of the more mixed use areas. So this area is unique in that it is just south of the airport. There is a lot of land that's actually owned by the airport outside of the airport perimeter. So meaning outside the runway area, that also supports industrial development. So it is a tough area in that you have a lot of kind of competing land uses side by side.
Yeah, because I've been through it before. My parents actually used to work off that area, so I used to work off of Yorkmount years ago, but so I'm a little bit familiar with that area. But yeah, I didn't want to come in and comment on anything because I didn't know if anybody was here from the community who felt differently about everything. But the other question I wanted to ask is like, is there a way to view this online to where like you could see like the different layers between like, okay.
They should have in the chat.
Yeah.
One of the links takes you to the map of the whole city. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the first thing that I said. I can send it again, but it's called we're calling it the online comment app, and you can I'll send it again in the chat. And we have the streets map on there, as well as the policy map, and you can leave a comment on either one. And I mean, if you have any questions, if you have time to pull it up right now, if you have any questions about it, you can ask us. And it tells you on that app, it will tell you the proposed draft place type, and that's kind of like in blue, that's like at the top. And then there's like a little table that will tell you what the existing place type was, and then what the status quo place type was without applying the comprehensive plan policies. So you can kind of see that change that was like that we did in our steps. So
right. And also online, there's also videos that like how-to videos, and there's also another one that kind of explains the whole beginning part of this presentation of how we got here and what this map means and what are the next steps. So, I mean, we have these polls to go through. If you want to, I don't know if you want to go through all of them. These are basically all of them. And in terms of, we're really trying to get from folks a sense of, was this approach, was it in the right direction? I mean, we know there's some tweaks here and there, specific locations that we're going to have to make, but overall, did this approach take into account the policies from the comprehensive plan, which reflected the community's vision, and is it in the right direction? And that's what all these different poll questions have to do. And, we try to divide it by different categories. So housing diversity, jobs, access to goods and services, and ways to mitigating environmental justice impacts. So the next, let me see. Sorry, my computer kind of went close here. There we go. So next we want to highlight what the above mentioned place type recommendations mean for this area in terms of attracting new housing units and future jobs. In terms of housing units, the place type recommendations within this geography will attract around 6,500 new, oh, we got somebody new. This number, geography will attract around 6,500 new housing units to this area. So this number of housing units is approximately 4% of all new units projected for the city by 2040. Hello, Carol, thanks for joining. We're kind of halfway through, but I'll go through it and then you could ask us any questions.
And
towards the
there'll
end.
be a recording that I'll see, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Perfect, perfect. So in terms of new jobs, the place type recommendations within this geography will attract around 4,500 new jobs. This number of jobs is approximately 2% of all new jobs projected for the city by 2040. Again, this is based on projections of the future growth and allocating that growth throughout the city. So now that we have walked through the draft 2040 policy map recommendations for this area, we'd like to get your feedback on how to improve the draft mapping approach. So the objective of this conversation is to collect feedback both on the current steps in the mapping approach, as well as potential revisions to the approach. There are two types of feedback that we can use to revise the mapping approach. We can identify additional steps to add to the mapping approach, which would help better align the final map with the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map. And we can discuss potential adjustments to the current mapping steps that would help improve the accuracy of the map. Now, what this process cannot do is incorporate parcel specific revisions that do not inform an overall change to the citywide mapping approach. Again, this is a citywide mapping effort that must balance future needs and opportunities. But obviously, if there's like a specific parcels that you have specific questions or that you see an inaccuracy, we do need to hear from you so we could highlight those changes. So, okay, now that we've gotten your feedback on what's been reflected in the mapping approach so far, let's turn our attention to what might be missing from the mapping approach. We recognize that the current mapping approach is just a starting point, and we may need to add some additional steps to better align the map with the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. We want to share a few suggestions for additional steps with you all and see whether or not you agree with the suggestions. The additional steps that we've heard from our interdepartmental stakeholders, I mean, the other city departments that we've been working with throughout this process, are related to 3 of the 10 place types. First, let's look at what we've heard about manufacturing and logistics. We've heard from our partners in economic development that manufacturing and logistics is very important to maintain and to preserve. Is it more important to preserve? So the question is to you, is it more important to preserve existing manufacturing and logistics sites, or to consider where repurposing these areas may better serve other community needs in the future? So, we're putting it out there. If y'all want to chime in, and in this specific area, as Jimmy highlighted earlier, there is a lot of industrial in there, but there's also a lot of vacant land. So does that vacant land, and some of that vacant land is entitled for industrial uses. So is the preservation of that industrial manufacturing and logistics critical, or do you see opportunities for other uses?
You guys can either put it in the chat or just unmute yourself and talk. There's only 2 of you, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I certainly understand the the impulse to preserve manufacturing and logistics. And I know the city is
currently sort of geared towards, growing that sector. But I guess in my opinion, I really think that, especially, I think some of this stuff needs to be repurposed. Now that's coming from me, somebody who doesn't live over in that area. So I'm just speaking for myself and kind of my personal attitudes towards it. But just sort of like, I think where, some of the contradictions I think play out within the plan are when it comes to sort of preserving some of the manufacturing or even expanding manufacturing and logistics as a land use, and also like the environmental justice aspect of things. So, and I understand that there's some difficulties with like brownfield testing and that sort of thing, especially on a lot of these old like manufacturing sites. I think over some of that stuff off the airport is not, has been more kind of like distribution centers and everything in the past. I think BASF is over there. So there is some like kind of chemical stuff that's kind of in that area too. But I do think that maybe the city should try to look at like at kind of repurposing some of that stuff.
Okay, no, definitely make a note of that. Yeah, this area is, I mean, there's a lot of, constraints in this specific location geography because of its proximity to the airport, because of it's really in the flight path, under the flight path of the runway. So it talk about environmental justice issue there. So it's very limited in terms of uses, and it's actually a very large area. So let me go on to the next question. Sorry. So let's look at what we've observed related to neighborhood 2. And neighborhood 2 is a place type that is a little higher density in residential. So you're talking about more multifamily development. And we observed that, is it more important to preserve existing single family lots or provide more housing options along major corridors? And that's something to consider. And in this specific area, we have seen more requests, for rezonings for multifamily development, especially along Whitehall and especially along Brown Greer and I-45 in some of those locations.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of kind of townhome and condo developments over that way in the past few months that I've been able to get over there. But yeah, I think with the neighborhood 2 stuff, yeah, I don't really have an issue with it. I guess I'm more concerned about like the expansion of manufacturing and logistics. That's kind of that.
Okay. So, and finally, let's look at what we've heard about the commercial place type. We've heard from some of our planning colleagues that, a lot of the existing commercial development throughout Charlotte doesn't really align with the comprehensive plan vision for walkable and integrated community. So, how important is it that commercial places in this community planning area evolve into neighborhood activity centers? And the difference being a neighborhood activity center is, it's not just big box retail. There's actually some other amenities, and there's also, in terms of mobility, there's other aspects of it in terms of mobility and walkability versus a pure commercial development. So we can talk about it, or no comments, or we could continue.
I just had a quick question about,
sure.
So for as far as like the process goes, so we had the phase 1 where there was sort of the existing map with everything and kind of getting people to understand like place types. And now there's this phase where we're looking at like the map of where we kind of project Charlotte to grow according to the policies of the 2040 map. And so I guess like the community area planning aspect of it, that would be the the final step after the policy map has been adopted?
Exactly. Yes. So
Okay.
that, right. So the policy map. So once we go, this is like the first draft of the policy map, and we're doing this engagement effort, and we're doing this online now. We might have to do something in person. We haven't decided yet. Then do a second draft of this policy map. And the idea is to get it to council for adoption by February. And after that, then we'll start the community planning process, which again, then we'll be going back to these geographies and doing a deeper dive into more specifics, and not just looking at place types, but it's also going to be looking at the other policy recommendations in the plan, and looking at, other, projects, programs, like very more specific, kind of more along the lines of what the area planning process was before. I don't know if you were familiar with that process, and would definitely be more hands-on for this specific geography. I mean, for all the geographies. And that will start, we're in this process now, but the idea is that it would happen after the policy map is adopted sometime next year or 23, because we also have to, the UDO is also in the works of being adopted as well, and that's slated for, I believe, July of next year.
So I guess the deadline to get the comments on this map is November 14th. And so then from the kind of timeline that I've seen from everything, so it'll be comments are due by the 14th. There will be another map to be released, and then that will be the one that council votes on. Will be that third map. Am I getting that right?
Yes. Yes, and that map that'll come out after this version, I think we haven't determined what exactly that comment period will be, but will go through, the public hearing process and council, and that one really will be to fine tune it. Like it would be really, are there any like glaring problems that we would have to fix? And really taking it through the review and adoption process through council, and hearing from them what some of their comments or concerns are. And then, yes, get their approval and adoption by February of 22.
So there would still be a period for engagement and comment on everything, but it would be more kind of typical of other policies where there'd be like a public hearing.
Right. It would be
go
more
through the
right.
committee.
Yes. Planning committee, planning commission, and the city council committees and city council itself. Yes.
Thank you.
So finally, I mean,
Carol, did you have a comment?
On that last question, so I don't live in the area anymore either, but I'm very familiar and was very, very engaged with this area for about a decade. This is why I was just interested in this one. And so I can't speak since I don't live there any longer, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't say that it's important that the commercial places be able to evolve into neighborhood activity centers. And that's what we lacked. You had to have a car for everything until, you built a few little, until developers built a few little neighborhoods just out of concrete.
Yeah. This area, it's like really the only area that's somewhat of a neighborhood center is the Airsley. Like you would have to go.
That's what I was referring to as Airsley.
Yeah.
When we just, and that was, that can't, that's created out of whole cloth, and that works, but evolving into a neighborhood activity center is even a little more natural. Like the whole entire thing isn't owned by development, built by a developer.
The Whitehall was very huge.
Because like exactly, because like I wonder what % Airsley is still even considered walkable, because it's like specific things. But
Yeah, and even Ayersley, we had to go back in and retrofit like that main street to make it more pedestrian friendly. Because when it was first built, it was still, I mean, yeah, they had the kind of like the bones of a town center, but people were speeding down that street, and they had to put like speed bumps and make it a lot more like safe. Yeah.
exactly. And, it was the first for us in Southwest Charlotte. We were
Yeah,
super excited to get something.
Mhm.
But so I can't imagine that the answer to this question isn't, that's important, real important for that area.
Yes.
To
yes.
have areas evolve in the neighborhood activity centers.
Right. And it's been done in places. You see like the huge parking lots that are then filled in with, multifamily and other office and other developments. And then, so you kind of like build around, and the big boxes evolve. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of empty big boxes in a lot of places. So
Yeah.
they evolve to other uses. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, good point. Good point. So now we're going to go into like the actual map itself, and you'll have the opportunity to annotate it and provide not specific comments, but more like, and there's a description there. So if you have any questions, like if in your Zoom controls, if you go to view options drop down at the top of your screen, and you'll see something that says annotate, and under annotate, choose stamp and use the heart. And then I'll pull up the map. And when you in the map, you can click on the areas you have a comment, you have a question, and we can talk about it, and then we'll be recording that map. So this is the map for this area. And then if you can use that annotate feature to highlight some of the areas you want to talk about. So just to go over like the colors, and then you have the legend on the side here. The blue area, basically like the Whitehall, South Tryon area, that's your community activity center. So, the place type, what that talks about is that, yes, it should evolve, like we were talking about before. Here you have this kind of like this teal. This is more of the campus place type. And I think this is where the Microsoft is, the big office complex here.
Arrowwood.
Arrowwood, yeah. So, and then some of these areas, this is the community activity center, but some of this, I think this is where the police training academy is off of Beam Road, Shopton Road. So, this is, if you want to place some, let me take this out.
Is
If
it
you want-
another map that has this Brown Greer, Steel Creek, Westinghouse, South Tryon, or it's not because
Yeah,
it's not in
that's
the PKA?
another, I mean, it's all on the same map, but that's another meeting. That would be, I think that's Southwest Outer.
Yeah. Gotcha. Just curious. Cool.
I don't know the schedule of when that meeting is, but
That's cool.
I could
I
check
know
online.
that makes
Yeah.
sense. It is.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, to do the whole city in one meeting would have been impossible. So we tried to divide it up into kind of more manageable areas.
Yep.
So this is your opportunity to add some annotations if you want to.
Yeah, let's see.
This is the old Coliseum area, the City Park area along West Tyvola. That originally, when that Coliseum was torn down, so this is for like Charlotte natives. When that Coliseum was torn down some time ago, and it was city-owned land, and then it was sold. Then a developer, they rezoned it. It was going to be more of a mixed-use development. Turned out to be, well, I mean, there's some mixed-use components about it, but it's really more multifamily and townhomes with some out parcels of retail.
It's kind of random.
Yeah, not as intense as it was originally envisioned. But we are seeing a little bit more like infill development in that area.
Mhm.
And this is a tough area. This is another one that I think we have to relook at some of this area, because a lot of this land is actually owned by the airport. So some of this might be changing.
Just a question, because
Sure.
I'm curious about how do y'all typically map like stuff within like how does it work with like the flight path stuff? Because that's a
Yeah.
little I'm not I'm not as familiar with all that kind of stuff, but I was just curious about how that process works out.
Yeah, so there is something that's called the airport noise overlay. And I have to look in the UDO what the translation is. I mean, there still exists a airport noise district, but I have to look at the UDO to look at the specifics. But it's so large. I mean, you would think like, oh, it would all be like non-residential uses, but it kind of covers a lot of this area. And the idea is that you try and develop, the furthest away from the airport with residential.
Yeah.
As you get closer and closer to the airport, you would want more airport supporting uses, the manufacturing, logistics, some retail, some hotel developments, maybe mainly on the north side of the airport towards the entrance to the terminal. And you can have some office uses. Residential is tough along, as you get closer to the airport. You can have some multifamily, because then you could build better sound, barriers into that development. It gets very difficult when you're talking about single family development. You think people when they're buying, they know hey, the airport is there. But it's like the commercials. Sometimes you see that they're right next to the airport.
Mhm.
The airport is a massive investment. Public investment's been going on for decades. It's there. It's not going anywhere, and it's just the traffic is actually increasing more and more. It's one of the busiest airports in the country, becoming it is a major hub for American and just keeps growing. So, and they're expanding. There's another runway that's under design. So, yeah, that's a constant battle in this area. And, I'm sure if you go to some of the meetings by the airport folks, even they say some of like the flight path designations, some of that is completely not up to them. It's up to the FAA. So it's a tough balancing act. Like in this map specifically, this big, I don't know if you see my arrow, but this big, this neighborhood zoo, that's actually, we need to look at that because it's been rezoned for MUD and for I1CD. So MUD meaning mixed use. I believe it's some hotels, some retail. And then right at the interchange of Arrowwood and I-45, this is where the Top Golf is at, and then they would have some warehouse distribution.
Are the premium outlet shops? Is that
That's here,
there?
just outside this area.
Okay.
Yeah, and even then, and even this area here, we need to relook at because there's some rezonings in the works now that will change the dynamics here. So this is so yeah.
I wonder if any of the industrial that we talked about earlier that I agreed with what was said, that it should be looked at for reuse in this area. Wonder if any of it could go into some of that airport area that you don't want to put residential.
Yeah, yes. I mean, that's something we need to relook at, because even as you get north here, like this is the intermodal yard, the Norfolk Southern Intermodal Yard, and
Mhm.
there are plans to expand that intermodal yard. So those are things that we need to look at. I mean, it was built that it could potentially, like there's the railroad goes underneath West Boulevard here, that it could expand further. So, and as we see with more, intermodal shipments and, everyone buying things online, everything being shipped everywhere, there's a huge demand for more of this manufacturing and logistics place type.
As long as things are being shipped, right?
Yes. Yeah, we want them to be shipped. It's like, please. So,
guess
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is there going to be any more like in-person engagement on this, or is this all just going to be virtual? Because I know that there's a lot of people there's some folks in the community who have talked to us, and I think they're just kind of frustrated because there's some older folks I know who would like to get engaged with stuff. Because they can't deal with, I know that there's like some stuff at the library and the YMCA, but that's just what I was curious about.
Yeah, no, we're considering it, and I think we're leaning towards having them. So, our building's actually going to be opening up to the public next week. So things are starting to open up again. So we are definitely looking at it very intensely to have a couple of in-person meetings. So just be on the lookout, and once we decide, we'll find a way to put the word out to let everybody know that, when and where they will be happening. But yes, we are looking at having some in-person meetings.
Thank you. And I've got to run, but I really
thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate that. I think we're pretty much done. Yeah, this is kind of like the last slide. So, all these sessions are recorded. They are hard copies in the libraries and the YMCAs, and we are looking for your feedback. And if your feedback is we want some in-person meetings, we definitely would want to hear from you about that. But thank you all for attending.
Hey, y'all done a lot of great work. I know you still got a long way to go, but it's been good. It's hard work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate
you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Well, they were nice.
Stop sharing. Yeah, they were very nice.
I love when people have questions. I think it's like a good sign.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did that, Molly and Ren. Yeah, it's like, just start talking.
Yeah, well, it's only 2 people. It's a little easier, but
Yeah, I've done
I
all
wonder-
the meetings, and it's usually like only like 1 to 3 people will come, and so we usually just chat.
Yeah.
The other one is like, I think at noon it was like 28, and it was 16 tonight. So they had
And
a lot.
the other, wow.
apparently that's like the Delworth area, and they're just they were not like super friendly or like welcoming in them. One, at least I heard in the afternoon, like
Yeah,
they were like
100%.
like during the presentation, they're like in the chat, like getting upset about stuff. But it's like, I don't know, but they were like, I was in the meeting with like Jay and them earlier, and he was saying like their area is not really going to change that much. So
I know.
I don't know
It's
why
like,
they're so upset about it. Like,
area is pretty much going to stay the same.
yeah.
Who did that? I'm assuming Catherine or Kathy did that meeting.
I think Jay did it, but Kathy was in there. That's why and she was support. That's why I think we switched.
Yeah, because I thought Catherine at one point was going to be on this meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you. And thanks, Molly,
Yeah.
for recording for me since
Oh yeah, no problem.
I switched back over to Alberto. Oh,
No
we definitely have to end
problem.
that.